Well, thanks very much. Wow, that sounds like an exciting lineup for the rest of the year. So I'm glad I could be the filler for this week. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Umbraco today. My name is Ken Ballard. I'm the lead application developer at OnCall Interactive. If you tweet, you can tweet me here. I wanted to start off the conversation with finding out, I'm assuming most of you have either touched, seen, or heard of a CMS. I wanted to start out the conversation with hearing from you. What have your CMS experiences been? Have they been exciting? Have they been painful? Where are you at with that? What have you been using? What have you tried out? So I'm just going to go ahead and open the floor and let you guys shout out.
I think a lot of us probably, at homegrown, has everybody done their homegrown CMS? That's kind of, I think, where everybody starts out, and I saw the little graphic there, and that is kind of close to hell. So, tried a bunch, how everybody's tried the land stack too. I know that's probably buzzwords in here, but .NET-wise, I've pretty much migrated toward Umbraco.
Great.
Homegrown is where I started.
Yeah, nice. Anyone else?
Sitecore.
Sitecore. What were your experiences with Sitecore?
Pretty good.
Okay, awesome.
There obviously there's hiccups here and there, but overall decent.
What's the licensing like on that?
Expensive.
Is it like I haven't paid for it before? I know I've had some peers use it before.
I'm not real sure, but I've heard like 10 grand and up.
Okay, cool. Sir?
Orchard CMS?
Yeah. What do you think of Orchard?
So far so good. It's very young, very nice.
Yeah.
So far so good.
Yeah, they've been showing that off a lot at Mix this week too. Anyone else?
WordPress.
Yeah. Blog/CMS, and so that's interesting. They kind of the blurring of the lines between what a blog is, what a CMS is. I think it's also interesting. People assume that when you talk CMS, there's also going to be e-commerce just rolled in and everything else that you can imagine, social, everything. So, what is a CMS is sometimes blurring more. Some people use SharePoint as a CMS. Anyone else? Sergio?
.NET Puke.
Yes.
And community server.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So, Aaron?
Ectron? Anyone? Ectron?
Yes, Ectron. Interesting. Very ActiveX editor, black box. So, good. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're here for. We're talking about Umbraco today. It was written really to honor the .NET framework, and you'll see more of that as we dig into it. The project was kicked off somewhere around 10 years ago over in Europe, and it went open source in 2004. So I'm going to just jump right in because I'm talking to developers, so we're just going to start talking tech right away. Now, Umbraco is no different than most CMSs in that we abstract the template or the presentation from the content. The way it's done is a little unique, and so we're going to jump into that. We talk about document types, where we define the content. So that defines the actual structure of the content nodes that contains the content, where the content editors are going to be creating the content, and the templates, which present the content. Now this is where it really becomes honoring the .NET framework. It's very developer-centric. Templates are, interestingly enough, master pages. And when I found that out, when I was just looking at Umbraco about a year and a half ago, just initially, I was like, wow, I know what a master page is. That makes sense to me. That seems to be a template. So I was really excited. So, Umbraco, their tagline is the Friendly CMS. They came up with that recently, and I think it's kind of cute, and so I'm going along with that. Umbraco wants to love developers. Templates are master pages. There's also a functionality called a macro, and they can be implemented in two different ways, either via XSLT, which is kind of the standard CMS process, like if you've ever used Nginx as a CMS, it's all XSLT all the time. Your entire site, all logic's written in XSLT. Umbraco uses offers you another option, which is user controls. I will not enter the debate of XSLT versus user controls. If you'd like to see that debate, go to our.umbraco.org, and there's a healthy 6-year-long debate about which is better. And as developers, we can make a decision which is better, right? And we can talk a little bit about that a little later. Bob is an expert in XSLT macros, and I'm more of an expert in user control macros, so we can have that debate up here too if you like. We also have data types, which help you define the data, which are used to define the data within the document type. The data types are extensible using C# or VB or whatever you want to use in the .NET framework. So this really allows you to constrain the data that's going into the CMS. And there's a huge API. Like a lot of open source projects, the API is a little too huge, in my opinion. And in most people's opinion. They're trying to straighten that up, and they've created some clear paths to done in the API, which we'll go into a little bit. I'm a big fan of lolcats. Jason can confirm this. So Umbraco also loves users. One of the things that, when I was talking about document types and data types, where we can tightly constrain the data, there's some other functionality that allows us to define the hierarchy of the information architecture. We can really constrain the user very tightly and very easily, and it's fairly easy to do that. So we prevent the silly, don't click me. In a lot of my CMS implementations, I've had to put error handling and exception handling in that would eventually just result in routing you back home or presenting nothing because I couldn't figure out what the content editor had done to the poor website. Or I'll have broken links or broken images. That is all easily preventable in Umbraco, and so I'll show you a little bit how to do that. We also are able to create a domain-specific UI. The document types define the various nodes, defines the various content nodes throughout the system. We're able to create custom icons, we're able to create custom nomenclature throughout the UI within Umbraco. So it really becomes domain-specific for that particular implementation. And like any modern CMS should be offering out of the box URL rewriting. So you're going to be looking at SEO opportunities. You're also going to be looking at just not clunky URLs that have $ID equals 33334 or whack content, whack something. We don't see the term content in the URL. My good old friend Bill, he likes to say it's the economy stupid. Well, it's the open source stupid. There is no black box. Just today, Aaron and I were working through a problem that we were trying to figure out how to merge Umbraco and MVC and get them to play nicely together. By the way, that is one of the gotchas. On the current version of Umbraco, it is web form only. Umbraco 5 is bringing us MVC, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. There's no black box. You can log to Codeplex and get the sources right now. That allows you to decide, maybe you need to invent something here. Maybe you need to use something else. Maybe you need to merge a couple libraries, pull them together. Now, we do want to concern ourselves about upgrade path code. How do we maintain upgrade paths? Specifically, a lot of what we do actually is we inherit a lot from a lot of the libraries, a lot of the classes rather, in the Umbraco core library. So we extend, we use the open close principle, we extend, we do not perform brain surgery on Umbraco. Now that's one of the ways that we preserve upgrade path. The other way that we preserve upgrade path is that we actually grab the sources and put them into source control for every major project. So if we do need to customize it, we're ready to go and we can customize it. We have a nice, clear change path, change log of what we've made to the core Umbraco. We tend not to do that because really Umbraco is pretty well built to allow us to extend, not modify. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into some examples of code here now. Let me pull up Umbraco. So this is the UI, slightly older version than what's out right now. And it's running in the web dev server, so it will be just a little slower performing, and it's on my laptop, which I need to rebuild. So, this is the Umbraco UI. This is the front end that we have implemented. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through how to create a document type, like we talked about, how to create a template to present that document type, and then how to actually create some content. You know, see here are some examples of content nodes. Let me go ahead and jump right over into creating a document type. So a document type defines the structure of the content. An example here is the home page. Let it load. Here I can define the properties of the home page. Now bear in mind, we're simply defining the XML structure is essentially what we're doing. So you see here that we have the site name, the site logo, copyright holder, etc. Part of the reason we have, let's say site logo is right here, is where that's presenting. The reason we have that in the home page is Umbraco is recursive. So all of its children can refer back to its parents all the way up to the top. So I could define, for example, site logo, as long as I'm using the same property name across the board, I can use that in all the document types, and I could override that in a child. So the home is here. Let's say we have a landing page and then a body page. Let's say the body page has its own site logo. There's a sub-brand or something. All these pages and the home page are using the parent's home site logo. But this one, because this child down here, because it has a value set, it overrides that. So as long as the value's empty string or not even defined in the document type, it would refer to its parent. So this is just a simple document type. I'm going to create a new document type here. I'm going to uncheck create matching template. Essentially what that does is it runs out and creates a master page to go along with this obnoxious. Great. So we've got a sample home page here. Now something that you'll notice, we have four different tabs here. The info allows us to define what are the allowed templates. So I get to really restrict the user. I get to also define what is the default template. Now I can set the permissions to allow different users access to different portions of different sections of this functionality down here. The next tab is structure. This is where we get to define the hierarchy. So I can say under sample home, the only thing that is allowed is a sample landing. So I get to enforce the information architecture. You cannot jump out and put a tertiary page under the home page. That is one of my favorite things about the platform. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a sample property here. And here's a data type here. We'll go a little bit into data types a little later. You can extend these. I'm just going to go ahead and select a rich text editor. This one here. Now you see this tab drop down. What I can do is I can make the user interface clearer in Umbraco. It's really not for programmatic functionality. It does not end up in the XML. It's hard to find in the API, and really it's not easy to find in the API for a reason. The tabs are simply to organize the content for the content administrator. It's about the only purpose they serve. One of the things that I usually do is unless it is a truly like systematic property, I do not put them on the generic properties tab. And the reason is because there's a lot of other Umbraco system properties on there, and my property would just get lost in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new tab. And you can change the sort order by renumbering them if you like. A little clunky, but that's fine. And then they get all fancy here, and you do not drag up there. You actually, that's for reordering them within the tab itself. You actually have to change it here for content. Ooh, good. The style sheet went away. Let's try that again. See what happens. It did save it. Yeah, I should not be running in web dev server. Sorry about that. Okay, so now I've got the sample home. Going back over to my content section. Under the primary node, under the content node, all document types are available. So I'm creating a sample home. And you'll see it's right there. Gray means it's unsaved, unpublished. And I can change the dimensions of this rich text box and stuff like that in the data type definition. You'll see that the default icon is a folder. I can also change that icon in the document type itself. I'm going to go ahead and save that. So now I've created the document type, which defines the structure. You see that this test property is here. Let's change that to test value. There we are. And then I've defined my content. I'm going to go over to create a template. So, templates. Templates are master pages. Also, you see that there is a little master page editor here. Love it or hate it, it is there. It discovers all the files that are in. Let me go ahead and pull up Visual Studio here. Discovers all the files that are in the master pages directory. So you'll see that they're all right here. And if I go out here and create a new template, you know what? I don't ever create it through here. I'm going to go and do it over here because I'm not familiar with really if it's what it does. So I'm going to create a master page over here. Does it? Bob says it plays nice. I like Studio. Home master. Great. So standard master page. What you're going to see is, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I should have actually created it over there. Delete. Yeah. So I'm going to go and create it over here.
You could have reloaded another one.
Yeah. I needed to inherit from. It needs to come from the Umbraco master page. So. Master. Sample home master. So, I'm going to create that. And lo and behold, after some time, it's going to create it. Now, I do need to go ahead and add it over here as well if I want to see it in Studio. Or I can just go ahead and... Oops. I'm already showing, there we are, I'm already showing those guys, so I can just include it in the project now. There we are. Okay, so you see that it's both on the file system and over here it discovers all that junk out there. The next step is to go ahead and use a web server control to include the item that we want to include off of the content. So in this case, we're going to use our property name was test. You can use the Umbraco interface, and it gives you a little helper to add these values. You can say you'd like it recursive, which will go up through to the parent like I was talking about earlier, and so on. And it creates a web server control. Some grievances that I have with this editor. First of all, by default, it is 2 space tabs. Studio is 4. The other grievance I have is that the tags are not self-closing. There are other grievances I have. So normally I don't use this tool. But it is here. It's nice because it really offers your content editor / webmaster to edit the master pages, right? So they can really modify the templates a little bit. So now the next step is to tell the document type that this master page is an allowed template. So I'm going to go down to sample home. Select my brand new template. I'm going to save so it can refresh. And then I'm going to select my default template. It's been saved. Finally, I need to go out here to my content and I need to publish it. Done and done. I need it to refresh. There we are. So here is the friendly URL. We see the test value is presenting. If we look at the source here, view page source. That's interesting that there wasn't any header on that. But
It's not inheriting from the.
thank you. Yes. So nothing but that's the only thing that I put into the master page. Umbraco, just like .NET, supports nested master pages, so you can nest your master pages to your blue interface. So that's the basics of creating a page in Umbraco. Easy peasy stuff. Where we get really interesting is the macros. Now I'm going to show you some user control macros. You can implement macros also using XSLT.
So just a question.
Yeah.
The actual contents, how was that saved? Where was it saved?
That's a good question. So it's saved in two places. It's saved in a SQL Server database, but where it's actually reading it from in presentation is it's reading from this Umbraco config. So right here, if we go and
So actually save the entire content to the site as an XML document?
it saves it as an XML document. It also caches it. In the web in the HTTP context, and that's something we'll get into a little later. But Umbraco is tightly coupled to HTTP context right now, so obnoxiously so, but it is. So yeah, it's all, and when the publish actually pushes it out into the XML. So this is where it's reading for live data. I guess one other thing that I should probably back up and show you as well is Canvas. Sometimes it's really neat, and sometimes it falls apart. Yes. Good. Okay, I've turned it off. Essentially, it's inline editing, and you can edit some pages as long as you're using the Umbraco item web server control. You can edit certain items in place.
Better and clear than.
Yeah, I find that most of our users do not ever use that.
I don't think they want to.
It's conceptual, and it certainly is a wow effect if you're presenting it to a client, saying, you can edit in place. Are there any other questions before we move on to macros? I should probably stop for questions.
Is there any multilingual support?
There is multilingual support. Bob, can you speak to that at all? I haven't really done anything on that.
Multilingual support is just like everything else in Umbraco. You have the ability to create a language root node in content, and then you can actually assign user roles to a translator, and you can assign user roles to specific nodes. It doesn't do any kind of one-to-one copying. Like if you create a services node in your whatever your language-centric structure is going to be, it doesn't create a duplicate of that in all your other languages, just because most multilingual sites I've worked on, there's never a direct one-to-one. But so yeah, so you can have language root specific domains and map those to the language specific nodes in the tree.
So what you would do is basically just create a copy of all your English ones and put another name in. Somebody slows the word.
Yep, and you can actually relate. So you can actually relate those copies as well to each other. So you know you can send out a workflow notification if someone edits if it's an English-centric site, and it'll send a notification to the translation team that this English-specific page has been edited. This is your node you would edit in your language.
So yeah, assume, let's say all those properties that I'm assigning to the content that eventually show up on the page. You know if the database is friendly enough that it could extract all those properties for all my pages that are under the English language of my site, and send en masse to a translator. Just get an export to CSV and send to a translator.
Yeah, you could create a simple macro that would actually do that translation. Send it out to your translation service, so they could even bring it back as XML, and you could re-import it. It could be that simple. So so that and the UI is multilingual out of the box. Okay. So you set the ISO definition of the UI or the language of the UI, and then that's what's presented. So there's one-to-one translations for the UI aspect of it.
Other questions before we move on to macros? Okay. So the first macro that I want to share with you is an XSLT macro. We use on this slide, I'm just using it for navigation. And something to bear in mind is that there is a rich pile of packages, which essentially is what the community has developed. They're macros, add-ons, they're easy to install little things that sometimes work and sometimes do not. And one of the packages that I'm using on this site is called COG, and it's COG Navigation. It's just a simple XSLT macro that runs through and builds the navigation off of a defined node. So you simply point at a node, and it walks through the tree and builds the navigation. So you can choose how you'd like the navigation built. If you'd like to abstract your navigation from your actual content, maybe have this layer of abstraction, you can do that. Some CMSs do that, where you have to define your menu, and you have to define your content, and relate the two. If that works in your implementation, you can do that. If you want your navigation to be just based on the nodes that are in your normal content structure, you can do that too. You can also, depending on how you set up the XSLT, and this one out of the box, has the ability to hide items from navigation. And we, for example, in this case, on the FAQ page, navigate out here. The way we're handling one-to-manys is that there are children of that FAQ page. So there are in number of Q&As, right? So you have morbidissime little lorem question and little lorem answer. And so we have them displayed here. So we use a user control macro to present these, but we need those hidden from navigation. So the XSLT is simply set up to ignore that. So we just download the package, and I can show you in the, go to the master page here. So referring to a macro is as simple, get this one here. Oh, main nav. There we are. So it's as simple as taking the macro, using the Umbraco macro web server control. And what happens is that we can expose properties to the XSLT, or you can create public properties in your user control, which we'll look at in a second, and those are presented as attributes of that web server control.
How easy is it to insert that?
Yes. So as a content editor slash the middle ground between webmaster content editor, I get a library of macros that are in the system. And it will ask me all the properties. So they're all auto-discovered. We'll go ahead and create one in a second here. A best practice in basic Umbraco implementations is to encapsulate all of your code behind into user control. So rather than putting a whole pile of code behind into master pages, because really there is no code behind, frankly, for those master pages, we want to put them in user controls. Because bear in mind, we created a master page, but we never created an aspects page to implement that master page. It's being created programmatically by Umbraco. So where do we put the code behind? We put the code behind into the user controls. So I'm going to show you some user controls now. A little bit of background. There are two major projects in this solution. One is the Umbraco core project, and it comes by default as a website. It's easy to convert into a web application. I like to do that because I like web applications. And I don't like to fly by the seat of my pants with a little website. The other thing that we want to do, though, is we want to leave the core as basic and out of the box as possible. So what we do actually is typically, you'll see most Umbraco implementations, most people will create 2 projects. The second project includes all their user controls, sometimes their master pages while they're in dev, and so on and so forth. And we create a post-build script. Love them or hate them, they do get the job done. And we copy over 2 things. So we copy over anything that has a ASCX extension over into the user controls directory, because that's the directory that Umbraco is looking at, and unfortunately they hard-coded that path in the core code. It's looking at user controls for the ASCX files for the markup, and we copy over the DLL for the code behind, right? So just copy over the DLL into the bin directory of the Umbraco implementation, and copy over the ASCX files into user controls. That keeps your customization nice and separate from the core of Umbraco. It's easy to debug as well. You know, you're just going to get hooks automatically in Visual Studio. So let's go ahead and jump into a very basic macro here. So one of the macros that we wanted to do was we wanted a testimonial. So,
Testimonial generator?
pretty much, yes. Let's see here. Oh, those are. You know what? Let's actually use header banner. Okay, so header banner. You notice here this little banner right here. We have some settings around it where the designers, you know, sometimes they wanted that header to be blue on some pages, and sometimes they wanted it to be green, and sometimes they wanted flash in there, and so we gave them this little header tab that would include some properties such as blue or green, and you could add more values to there. The wrapping color, and so on. Well, we needed something to read those properties, and then you'll see that if I change this to blue, it was green. If I change to blue, save and publish, come on, work. It's not blue. Fancy, fancy stuff. Well, the way we do that is we use the Umbraco API. So a couple key namespaces you're going to want to look at. One is particularly Node Factory. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the API has gotten slightly unwieldy over the years. So they've created easier paths to done, and specifically one being Node Factory. The nice thing about Node Factory, by the way, you see we're just on page load here, and we just call fill. Is that I'm able to get, sorry, let me, yes. So, for some reason I felt like this needed to be on a property. Current node, so I get current node. So on the Node Factory, in the Node Factory namespace, there is a class called Node. A variety of methods, a variety of properties. The most important one being getCurrent. So what the getCurrent method does is it simply gets the current node based on where we're at in the navigation. So when we get that node, now we can find where we're talking to current node at. Yes, yes. Okay, so I've got some properties here. All you do is you just call get property, and you pass in the alias of the property that you define in the document type. So a header banner, a header alternate media, header wrapping color. Here's where we make the decision, and then we put some logic in here and make a decision whether we'd like to go blue or green and so on and so forth. A little error handling in there, a little exception handling, making sure that everything, the height is greater than 0 and so forth. Basics. So that is the basics of how you would code your macro. Now that is one approach is to accept is to have all those properties kind of encapsulated within the user control, looking at node factory. The other approach is to simply do this: public string foo get set. Now when I define I'm going to go ahead and put this in Umbraco and let Umbraco know about this user control. What's going to happen is it's going to use reflection to take a look at that user control's properties. It's going to see a public property, and it's going to go ahead and expose that, and when we set the macro up, it will be accepted as an attribute. So that's the other approach to playing around with some of the values. So you can either talk to current node and walk your way up or down the tree and recurse and so on and so forth. The other approach is to expose those in macro is expose those as public properties. So I'm going to go ahead and build my project. Build succeeded. I'm going to go back over to Umbraco. I'm going to go under developer. I always think, whenever I go into web dev server, I'm like, oh, I'll be fine. And then I regret it later on. I'm like, oh god, this thing is so slow. Okay, that was header, right? Let me see header.
Header banner.
Yeah, where do you see that?
Oh, no,
Thank you. Okay, so if we browse properties, see foo? It's right there now. We also have blue header media ID and green header media ID. Apparently I did expose a couple properties as well. So what I'm able to do now, I'm going to go ahead and save that property. You know what? I should do something with this foo. Let me go ahead and I'm going to go into the ASCX file, and I'm going to so I put a label there, just so we're not all confused about what that is. And then I'm going to just go ahead and put this property here. I'm going to this.foo.disp.text equals this.foo. No, .foo. Okay, so now I'm setting the text property of that label to the public property that I have exposed on my user control. I just built the project just so that DLL would copy over, the ASCX file would copy over into the into Umbraco, and I've browsed the properties and I've saved. So I've updated my macro. Now if I go into if I go into the template now, And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to copy this in case I need it, but I'm actually going to cut this macro out of here because I want to show off the little macro inserter. And now you're going to see that we have my property foo displayed right here. Note that we can define the properties as a variety of things. In this case, I've defined it as a string. I'm not going to dig into this, but I can define it to be properties in the CMS, so I can pull a property value from the content itself, so I can abstract and allow people to change what property I'm looking at. So that's kind of the advantage of exposing the property versus talking to the node factory. So the node factory allows me as a developer to really statically say, I'm always going to talk to this property. But what if the content editor adds a new property to the document type, and they want to change their CMS around a little bit, and they don't want to talk to a developer to change that setup? We don't have to hard code the aliases into the code behind if we use this method, right? So that's an advantage to, I have no idea what I'm picking here. And that's why I copy pasted my macro tag here. Where's my header? Let me just fix this up here real quickly. I just destroyed that. And foo equals this is a test. Let's hit Control F, Control Alt F, Alt S, which would not do much in Chrome. Theoretically, this is a test, should display somewhere around in here. Unless RCS. Oh, look at that. This is a test. So, coming out of the markup, through the macro wrapper of Umbraco into the user control. So nice layers of abstraction. So that's kind of the overview of a macro. So some important concepts in Umbraco. Document types define the structure of your content. Content nodes hold the content. Master pages or templates lay out the content. Macros, which are user controls, or XSLT, provide the programmatic and functionality of your site. So a pile of packages out there. You can go to our.umbraco.org and find those. There's also kind of a utility within the administration tool to find some of them. The search tool doesn't work that great. Just go ahead and go out to our.umbraco.org. You can import the zip files. So that's kind of an overview of that functionality. I'm going to jump into a little bit of enterprise implementation of Umbraco. Before I do that, are there any other questions?
You just had the search don't work well, the search on their side? Or?
The search for packages themselves. So yeah, search is a good question though.
Search on the content.
So search on the content, there's a couple options, and I haven't dealt a lot with out-of-the-box Umbraco search. I actually tend to like to use, for the smaller implementations, I like to use Google Custom Web Search, and for the larger implementations, I like to use a Google Search Appliance. However, right now in Dev, there is a library called Examine, and it is very fast, it is very good, it is a pain to implement. It's very difficult to implement. It's not well documented yet. The community is working on it right now.
When you use the Google Search Appliance, for example, is there a way for you to put a Google Search Appliance search box easily on your site?
Absolutely. Yeah, so the Google Custom Search, it's very basic for public site. For the Google Search Appliance, it's actually a rent. It's a rental of a box, and it's about $1,000, $2,000 a year. Is that right? $2,000 a year. It's really, really incredible. It works really, really well. For some budgets, it's really, really expensive. You know, for some budgets, it's very cheap. Depends on what you need. Depends on how much money you have. But the Examine is a good tool. It is still pretty much in dev right now.
My question is more
Bob?
like, there is a great get the search results. How easy is it to the search results in the middle of your site?
There's a great out-of-the-box XSLT extension. It's called XSLT Search.
Yeah.
So let's say you're not using media. Like, Examine would come in if you need to search PDFs in the library, your media library, Word docs, all that extra good stuff. But if you're looking at a quick implementation of a really robust site search that's based on the content that's in the CMS, XSLT Search takes about that long to install, and it's a simple form that submits to an XSLT, and it recurses through the data and gives you output. It's really nice and easy to use.
Is Lucene available?
The Examine is actually built on Lucene.net.
Mhm.
So
Something to bear in mind as well that I'm not going to go into during this discussion, but there is a way to secure the content as well, using out of the box or built on top of membership, .NET membership. So you can secure the content, and it's pretty nice actually. Content editors can go through their content tree and just right-click something and say make it secret. Are there any other questions before we move on to a brief discussion about enterprise implementation?
I may have missed this, but if I was using SQL Server as my backend,
Uh-huh.
what would be the data access?
What would be the data access? Okay, that's a good question. So, so we kind of want to think away from talking to SQL Server as much, because SQL Server is simply the staging, and it's simply the administration. It stores administration. The live content itself is in the XML file. So instead, I would encourage you to either, ideally, talk through the API directly, or less ideally, use linked XML. So those are kind of the approaches that I would suggest you use. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of an approach that we're using for an enterprise implementation where we actually cache some of the data out into a SQL Server flattened. So it's something unique. And what's unique about the XML file specifically is that because it is stored in memory, because it's cached, it's very, very fast access. Very fast access to that XML file if you're going through the API. If you're going through Node Factory. If you start going through some other approaches, it could be a little slower.
and the SQL calls are just the same thing.
Yeah.
That's the way the database is.
The database is structured very uniquely. It uses negative ID numbers for its primary keys to indicate that something has been not published yet or deleted. I can't even remember. I've not yet seen negative IDs as a primary key except in this implementation. So I don't usually touch the database. It is fairly rock solid, though. I have not had any difficulties with the database. But the nice thing is the database, the website can theoretically run without the database, the production website. So that's something to bear in mind. You can pretty well decouple the two if you wanted to. Any other questions? Sir.
So, does it, like, the most basic problem I can think of is the scale, to goblin gobs of data here, full confidence, and what in the file?
Excellent question. So because the file is loaded into memory, and because the file is not being regularly updated, right, we're dealing with fairly static data. Might republish something 20, 30 times a day at most, right? You're dealing with you're hitting an XML file that's in memory, so you're not dealing with any contention. I'm not quite sure exactly how they deal with the threading. Now, something that I can tell you is that we have load tested this for some implementations, and we've put 500 to 1,000 concurrents at it, and it has held up to load.
But so once you hit your physical memory, is there a choice as to what you do with more data?
I'm sorry?
Like if you've got like 20 gigs of memory, and
Yeah.
you've loaded 20 gigs worth of data in memory, can you scale after
That's a good question. I'd need to touch base with the core team and see exactly what that would look like. I don't know personally. I do know that there's been some pretty major implementations of Umbraco, and that it's been able to hold up to load. I think the thing to consider is that I'm not quite sure. At some point, the config file may get unwieldy, and I don't know. I need to ask the guys. If you give me your card, I would be happy to check and answer that for you later. Though.
The guys that have done the sites for like Vogue, some of there's some large publication type websites that are running this. They definitely have a different environment, but it's still based on the out-of-the-box install. But they do some load balancing, and everything's kind of getting spooled across multiple boxes. But out of the box, you just hit a tick, and you put the IP addresses. I don't know how that does with the memory aspect of it, but there's some pretty massively large sites running off of Umbraco.
I believe the ASP.NET website is also running on Umbraco.
Good point. That's right. Yeah.
And I don't know the exact details there, but they were talking about running that on Azure and just spinning up more instances of it. So that's one way it could be scaled.
So the suggestion is scaling out rather than scaling up in some scenarios. That's a good point. And I think that's a great segue actually into enterprise implementations. So one of the approaches that we have been using, so we're the new Boston Symphony Orchestra website is powered by Umbraco, and we're dealing with a couple thousand concurrent users at its peak usage throughout the year. So the way we manage that actually is first we acknowledge that not all websites are all content. Some websites have kind of this this breakdown, and I've been I don't know if you're familiar with the DAO symbol, but I've been drawing that a lot when I've been talking about the architecture. It's the circle with the squiggly and the two dots. So there's essentially two halves of the application, of the website. There's the application side, and there's the content side. We are tightly coupling the content side to Umbraco by using the Umbraco web server controls, things like that, into that front end. Then there's a little bit of application. So we create some widgets, if you will, within that content. On the other side, there's the application side. And the application side has all the functionality. So for example, in Boston Symphony Orchestra's website, you might have like the About Us, the education pages. That's all content. But then when you start getting into like performance calendar and ticketing and buying tickets, that's all application. But we want to have we want to have one administration location. So you go to Umbraco for both of them. And the nice thing about Umbraco is it lends itself well to hierarchical data. So what we do is for the application portions of this, and anything that we feel like we need to give it a little extra love, a little extra support, is we use event hooks. I don't know if you can see this code. I have a class that's inheriting from application base, which is in the Umbraco library. See here that we're adding publish event handler for before publish. I can catch on to the before publish, before save, after save, and so on and so forth. And what I can do is I can flatten this data and drop it into a SQL Server table. And I can transactionalize that process and cancel and roll back the publish if it fails. So that's what we do on some areas of the website, such as the performance calendar, where the data is very hierarchical and I don't want to recurse 5 levels up. And we are incredibly concerned about performance. There's a lot of data. We want it to respond immediately. We want to be able to handle serious concurrency, right? So one approach is to use Umbraco as the CMS to manage that content, right? Because we have performances, data around them, some content data. So Umbraco lends itself well to the workflow management and the content editing that a CMS offers, but it may not lend itself so well to some of what we're trying to accomplish in certain parts of our web application. So what we do is we have a before publish process. Here we're looking to make sure that the appropriate parents are published. Because if you think about an arts organization, you have seasons, you have productions, you have performances. I need that whole tree to be published before I can have a performance published, because I need some additional data from those other nodes. If they're not published, I present an error in the Umbraco interface. And if they are published, then I allow the publish to continue. In the after publish, we go ahead and go through the API or we go ahead and save that out to a SQL Server database. It is all about the publish, though. To the user, all they did was they published a content node. What we're doing behind the scenes is we're actually updating a cache. They didn't know that. And so it's really abstracted from the user. They really don't, it really minimizes the complexity. Because a lot of times I've seen websites, and I've done them myself, where I have this little job that runs around and updates a cache, or this other process, or this button that says update cache, or something like that. If we tie it into the publish, then we update one row. We're not going to deadlock that poor table because we're not updating the entire thing. We're updating one row. So it's really an interesting approach. The other thing that we want to consider is that on the application side, you may want to abstract the entire existence of Umbraco. You may want to drop a service layer in there and map everything out to data contracts or something like that, right? So Umbraco, in certain parts of your application, in an enterprise implementation, may only be a content editor. The other piece of our implementation is actually, Umbraco is not the system of record of performances, right? You don't go to the box office and they say, oh, hold on, let me pull up my content management system. They actually pull up ticket management system. So because there's a rich API, we're able to go from one application and pull all new records in for them and drop them in as unpublished content nodes. So we create half the record for them already. They put some content in there, publish it, and we're good to go. So the API is really rich, it's really available, and it allows you to abstract where appropriate. You can drop your own service layer on top of that. And one of the gotchas is that Umbraco is tightly coupled to HTTP context. That is a nemesis, that is the thorn in my side. And why? Because that means that I cannot just take the Umbraco library and reference it in my service layer. Now I have to have this other service layer on top of the instance of Umbraco. I have to have Asimix web services in the core Umbraco application. That is your workaround for dropping a service layer on top of Umbraco. It is a mess. It forces you to serialize, deserialize, serialize, deserialize, and reverse that to go out. But we've found that it's not too bad. We've found that we're able to work with it. And the thing to consider is that Umbraco 5 is coming. That it is going to be no longer tightly coupled to HTTP context. Now the thing to consider, though, is that this is going to be a project branch. In Umbraco 5, they're saying there's not going to be any new features. There will be new features because people cannot contain themselves. Developers love the gold plate, particularly in open source projects. There are no new features. It is going to be simply a branch into MVC. So if you are thinking about doing an Umbraco implementation and you have some time, I might suggest you wait. I might suggest you wait because the project is going in two directions now. Right now, it's web forms. And if you love web forms, if you want to use web forms, then don't wait. Just use web forms. And again, another debate I'm not entering is MVC versus web forms. If you want to use MVC, wait. Umbraco 5 is scheduled to come out. Bob, do you know the exact schedule date?
I heard yesterday during Mix, they said June.
Yeah, whatever. It's coming out Q4-ish.
It's been pushed back.
But I bet you they will. My guess would be is that during Code Garden they will release alpha.
And Co-Garden is in June, right?
June 15th, yes.
Co-Garden, if you'd like to go to
Copenhagen, most beautiful city in the world.
and have the budget, it's a nice trip. It's only €750 or something to actually pay for the conference, but the budget to travel is a little high.
€500.
€500, there you are.
$750 US. Though.
So, Umbraco 5 is coming. And something to consider, really, is that Umbraco, it comes with a community. First of all, the price is right. If you don't want any support other than our.umbraco.org, it's free. If you'd like a little support, it's a few €100. If you'd like a lot of support, it's €3,000. Hopefully someday they'll be accepting US dollars.
2 summers ago.
There is a richness in the community. Just like any open source project, there are the core folks, there are the MVPs, and there are the people that will debate till they're blue in the face. And there are the people that are passionate about the project. Umbraco is not all things to all people, is not all things to me. What it is a CMS that honors the .NET framework, and something that I've started to do through my development career is I've tried to honor the tools that I use. I try not to bend them into something they're not. And something that I like about Umbraco is that it did not try to bend the .NET framework into something it's not. It tried to fall right in line with it. Microsoft is backing Umbraco significantly. It was mentioned multiple times yesterday from the stage at Mix. They're continuing to back it. Even with Orchard, Microsoft is making sure and being very careful not to cannibalize Umbraco. They're supporting it significantly at this point. So, would I have been interested in Umbraco 2 years ago? No. This is a very, very interesting time for Umbraco, and I think it's something to consider when you need to evaluate CMSs. Some places to go for more. Umbraco.codeplex.com. You can download it. You can also download Umbraco, if you must, from the web platform installer. Bear in mind that WPI sometimes is a version behind. The next thing I want to mention is that we do have a user group forming. Go to builtinchicago.org/group/Umbraco. Next month, there is also a CMS Expo up in Evanston. If you'd like more information about that, Monday night of that expo, there's going to be an Umbraco meetup. Also, there's going to be a Joomla meetup and a variety of other CMSs. It's free. Should be a good time. For additional support, go to our.umbraco.org. You can download packages. There's a rich wiki there, and there are forums that you can chat and search. Also, umbraco.tv, and I think we have a few licenses available to that. If you don't have a license, it's €19 a month. Also, feel free to tweet me or email me. I'm at WendyCityKen. Any questions? Sure.
I got two, but so you said you wouldn't have considered it 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why is that?
It really wasn't on my radar. Some new versions came out. The schema, the XML schema was adjusted, so it's better performing. The API has expanded some. Node Factory was added into the library. So really, it started to expand a lot more into supporting code behind and user control macros rather than XSLT macros. I find it difficult to find resources and people that truly live, breathe, and eat XSLT. Usually it's a secondary thing that when we must, we will write it, kind of like regex expressions. So when there was really rich support for user control macros was when I was really very interested in.
And it's really young here in the States. I mean, really, when it came on your radar, it's been huge overseas because that's where the bulk of the community is. And the community-centric nature of just the whole European thing is much different than it is here. I've been involved with the project for 5+ years now, and there's always like 3 guys from the States that show up for Co-Garden. But there's hundreds of users here. And it's because everybody here is so proprietary, even though they're using something for free, it's like, I'm not going to advertise I'm using Umbraco to make money for my business. So we've been really trying to pry that community culture out of the developers here in the States. because, like Ken said, it's like that's the backbone of it. It's a great piece of software, but to have hundreds of developers at your fingertips at any given time who aren't looking to score a buck to help you, they're just looking to help. Tons of free code snippets available out there. You know, nobody's got the great right answer, but it's a great head start for a lot of things. So, but yeah, 2 years is probably the incubation period that we've been going on heavy here. We have two representatives at the HQ here in the States now. You know, so it's 2 out of 8 are from the States. And we usually rule in downloads. And that's what Niels Hartwig, the kid who started this thing 10 years ago, all the time would, beat us up here in the States and say, I've got thousands of downloads a day coming from you guys, but nobody pipes up. What's the deal? So that's been our challenge.
And fairly, some of those people find it in WPI and download it and delete it.
Yes.
All right, so my other question was, typically, or frequently I've seen publishing content that there's a little bit of a workflow, maybe some approval or some editing or, some stuff that has to happen before it can truly be published.
Absolutely.
Is there some stuff, some plugins or whatever?
Actually, it's out of the box. There is support for workflow. I didn't get into that, but yes, you can workflow it till you're blue in the face and up and down and left and right.
And you can extend it to make your own custom workflow too. I mean, out of the box workflow is really basic, but it is out of the box. So. And there's a couple projects in the works right now. Really trying to make it more like a Sitecore type, enterprise CMS workflow as an add-on.
Is it possible to take some of the editing functionality that you have in the backend and expose it as part of your public website so that you can use stuff like adding pages without actually being an editor?
Yeah, there actually are some ways to expose that. I've not done that. Bob, have you done that before?
With user's control, it's super simple. I mean, you're basically using Node Factory and exposing a Node Factory-based macro on the front end of your site.
Would you rewrite the logic that's already there in Umbraco's backend?
So the actual rich text editor is tiny MCE. Thank you. And so you can actually just take that and using the API, you can create a new content block or a new content node and save it and publish it. So it's like 3 lines of code to actually create a new item in the CMS and save it.
Yeah, so blog comments are a perfect example. Blog comments use the Umbraco API on the front end to take that content, create a node, and save and publish it, or save and send for moderation. So you're just using the exposed API for front-end user control.
And there is right now on r.umbraco.org, there's a great blog for Umbraco package that does exactly that. Some other packages to consider, like I mentioned at the beginning, the CMSs, we think it's a Swiss Army knife. There is a e-commerce or commerce for Umbraco that's kind of in dev. And so there's a lot of stuff that's out there that's kind of...
There's a user message board?
Our.Umbraco is basically a forum.
Is it?
Yeah, I mean it is not basically, it is a forum. And it's got thousands and thousands and thousands of topics.
Now, is that built on Umbraco? Though I think the question is there a message board in Umbraco? Is there a package?
uForum. Yeah, actually, that's the new. So basically, what happens is somebody in the community will build something like a forum based on Umbraco. It'll live for a couple years. People will beat it to death, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm going to make the forum 2.0." So there's a new iteration that's out that's based on a lot of the newer function and capabilities in Umbraco, and it's called uForum. Right through the packages, click install instant form.
Any other questions?
Can you talk a little bit about link to Umbraco?
Yes, I can. So I've only played with Link to Umbraco, but there is actually functionality to take your document types, automatically generate some classes to which you could use link statements to query your Umbraco XML file. So that is another approach, and thank you for mentioning that. I had mentioned use link to XML. I forgot all about the approach of this. I'm just going to show you real quickly what it will generate. I'm not going to even try to code in front of you because that is usually a big mess when you try to code in front of a group of people.
And there are episodes on Umbraco TV that are specifically geared toward link to Umbraco.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think those ones are actually free and available, are they?
Yeah,
Or-
there's good teaser
Yeah.
content out there. Trust me.
So what I did was I right-clicked on the document types node, export to .NET, and it will generate either POCOs with abstractions or without abstractions. You can give it some kind of namespace. I'll just take the default. And what it does is, ta-da, it will generate this for you. And so these are queryable classes. But if you notice, let's go and take a. I'm sorry, they're enumerable classes. If you take a look at one of these, sample home, you'll see, for example, my sample home class is here. My property test is generated, and so you can include that. I would encourage you to do that with abstractions, because the moment you make a change to one of your document types, you will destroy the poor thing unless you are abstracted, right? So we encourage you to talk to abstractions, not implementations. So that's the basics. Then you just copy that, put it into your project, and go forth and conquer. Other questions? I'm going to go and go to art.umbraco.org. Good. Well, thanks so much, guys. If you do have any questions that come up, like I say, feel free to tweet me when you can. Feel free to email me if you'd like my card. Just hit me up afterwards. And then also I would encourage you to take a look at the meetup at CMS Expo. What's the URL?
I didn't even ask that.
No, don't worry. We have the Googles.
It's probably CMS Expo. I think there's
.net.
.net/Umbraco.
Yeah, so there is a meetup out there,
Meetups.
and it's just coming up in a couple weeks. So, if you'd like to go and like to meet up with some people that have used Umbraco, talk with them about their experiences, it's an opportunity to go chat with them, and it's free. So
the conference itself sounds like it's going to be pretty interesting too, because it's basically side by side all these CMS, softwares. They're touting that at any moment you can, see how one does something and go right across the hall and see how the other one supposedly does the same thing. So.
yeah. Anything else, guys? Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.